Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Saurabh, and you're listening to the MBA Alums, the podcast where we talk about all things MBA. Today, I have with me Akshay Kohli, and just to give you a quick background, Akshay is from India and he went to McGill in Canada for his MBA and currently works in finance. So let's talk to Akshay and get to know more about Akshay's MBA experience. Welcome to the show, Akshay, and thanks for taking time out to talk to us.
Hey Sarab, thanks for inviting me to the show.
So let's get started. And why don't you give us a little bit of a background to yourself, like where you were born, where did you go for your undergrad, and why did you think about MBA?
Yep, absolutely. So like you mentioned, I was born in India, born in the north part of the country in Chandigarh actually, and moved to Delhi. In fact, when I was very young, and most of my schooling has been in Delhi. I was one of the same kind of persons who were pushed to do engineering when we were growing up. I did not know obviously whether I wanted to be an engineer or not, but huge influence of my parents in terms of pushing me to do engineering, and I got into the same rut of preparing for an engineering entrance examinations in early 2000s, and finally got into an engineering school in Patiala called Thapar University. It was a lot of fun those 4 years in Thapar University. Did my electronics and instrumentation engineering there. And right after graduating from my undergrad, I started working at Tata Consultancy Services. I worked for Tata Consultancy Services for about 5 years, and most of those 5 years were for about 3 years. I was working in technical product management. Was working mostly in the airlines division. So my clients were mostly from the airline industry, and a part of it, I was also working as a consultant, kind of helping my clients with their disaster recovery strategy. And at the fag end of my career with TCS, I was working in the sales division where my clients were the central government of India, and which was a great experience, completely different from what I had been doing for TCS. So it was kind of a diverse experience, some of it in product management, some of it in pure consulting with architecture, IT architecture in mind, and some of it in pure sales, purely customer facing. So that was kind of my high level background really at that point.
Now that's interesting, but you had me for a while when you said it was a lot of fun and you were in instrumentation and electrical engineering. But that being said, so you graduated from engineering. Now you're into your career. You didn't know if you wanted to do engineering, but now here you are. You've graduated. You're working with TCS. What was going on in your head? Like, the first few years right out of graduation, were you like really interested in the work that you were doing? How were you feeling then in the first couple of years?
Yeah, definitely. So I think right after my undergrad, when I started working for TCS, at that point, to being very honest, I was looking for an exit option. And I initially thought of either starting to prepare for an MBA, MBA entrance examinations in India, because at that point, my view was that I wanted to stay in India. I wanted to do an MBA in India. So I was very focused on that aspect. And a part of me was thinking maybe I should go to a product specific tech company, something like ST, Ericsson, ST Microelectronics, or something like I don't know. We can talk of Google or not today, but specific product centric, and not, let's say, in consulting. But and then I decided I was doing a lot of introspection. I decided that the way my personality is, and if I wanted to enhance my personality and kind of use up a lot of my strengths, I thought that an MBA would be a better way to go. I think the mistake I made, because I mean it's always nice to go back and in hindsight everything looks different. But I started preparing for entrance examinations in India, and entrance examinations in India are probably not the best use of my time, I think now, because I did prepare for entrance
Hmm.
examinations, and I took CAT, MAT, ZAT, and all of those examinations, and I didn't get what I wanted to in terms of the kind of schools that I wanted to go
Hmm.
to. So this was about 2012, 2013.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2013 January when the CAT results come out and the ZAT results come out. I had decent scores. I had some wait lists,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't really convert my top schools. Let's just put it that way. And at that point, it
Mm-hmm.
was obviously disappointing because I did want to get that, and there was something that came up at work which I was always avoiding because my clients were in UK. There was always a chance to go to UK to work for them
Mm-hmm.
directly, and I was trying to always avoid that because I was thinking that maybe I should focus on my MBA aspirations in India.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, so
So
let
yeah.
me cut you here for a little bit because I think this is an important point here. So you went into engineering, and you did that just because like everyone, most of the people were doing engineering back then, and then you are now working with TCS, and you're again thinking, okay, I don't like this work, I need to do something else, and you start thinking about MBA and product centric organizations. But was there a time there where you actually sat down and said, okay, I'm going to look at my personality, my skill set, my motivators, and then see, what career aligns with that? Or was it that MBA was sort of a gut feeling and then you acted on top of it? The reason I ask it now from you is that looking back, do you think that that is something which is an important exercise that helps when you're thinking of an MBA or and making that decision to go spend those 2 years and a lot of money that goes into getting an MBA?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great question. I think a lot of us in that space, at least in that time, we were not thinking too much about the career that we wanted to have. We were thinking too much about getting out of somewhere rather than getting into
Hmm.
something. For example, we all wanted to get out of the jobs that we wanted to do, and a lot of engineers face that who probably have a different kind of a personality.
Hmm.
And I was in the same situation where I wanted to get out of what I was doing,
Hmm.
and at the same time, the option that I saw, an exit option that I saw, was an MBA because I thought it was a great fit for me to at least acquire those skills or work on those skills that I identified.
Hmm.
But I think the mistake I made was that I wasn't focusing myself on the kind of career I wanted.
Hmm.
Um, for example, if I look back and I think that, hey, this is the kind of work that I want to do, and maybe I should just focus on getting into that kind of an industry or getting into that kind of function. So the story might have been
Hmm.
different, but I think um, I focused a bit too much on the kind of education I wanted and not the kind of career I wanted, which is why probably um, which is why I probably took the decisions I took. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's say we go back to that point right now, and you're doing it again, and you're thinking about both your career and the career that fits with your overall personality and the kind of education uh, that you want. Um, do you think that, like, how do you think that would have impacted your decision? Both the fact that A, you've taken into account what kind of career you want, and B, you have thought about, okay, what kind of education and location you want to be in. So how do you think that would have factored into your decision if you were doing it again?
Um, so, for example, if I go back again around 2012, 2013, and just that I did my eventually I did my MBA in 2015. But if I go back again to 2012 and 13, and let's say if I had to change anything in terms of the way I thought, and if I had completely focused on the way I wanted my career to be, or kind of tried to figure out what I wanted my career to be, it could have gone anywhere. I mean, I might have. I would say if I had to give someone an advice at this point, I would say rather than focusing on the kind of education you want, if we try to focus on the kind of work that we want to do,
Hmm.
it might lead you to a path which is closer to what you really want to be or what you really want to do, as
Yeah.
compared to taking the education route, which well, frankly, sometimes the education route also is amazing, and it learns it, you learn a lot of different things which you might not have. But
Hmm.
the education route either might be expensive, might take more time, or
Hmm.
might also have a lot of frustration around it. So
So the sense I'm getting is that there are two ways you can think of an MBA. One is okay, this is where I want to get to. This is my career aspirations, and these are my career goals, and then work backwards from there and see where the MBA fits in. Or you can take an experimental route where you go into an MBA program and then like see what's out there and maybe explore different career options and then kind of figure out what you really want to do. And I think both of them are fine as long as you know what you're getting into. But what I hear you saying is that if you get into the education route, you might end up taking a little bit of a longer way to eventually get to the career or the kind of trajectory that would align with your kind of personality or would help you grow faster, right?
Yeah, it is possible. Although, frankly, those two routes could work for, I mean, it could work for a personality, whatever personality you are. Either of those situations can work because, frankly, it's not the easiest to figure out what you want to do in your life. So, figuring
Exactly.
out what your career might look like or being able to experiment. For example, the biggest challenge people have today in their jobs is that they don't know how to experiment or they don't know how to kind of get out of their comfort zones and try different things. It's not that easy to leave your job for a lot of people. Um, and
Hmm.
an MBA kind of gives you that opportunity to get into a space where
Hmm.
you can experiment, talk to different people. And in fact,
Hmm.
being in a school with a lot of people, you get first-hand experiences from different people. So again, both of those routes work for people, but I think the ideal way, if at all, is to first figure out what your end goal is, because an MBA will always be a means to an end. It can never be an end in itself.
Yeah.
So I would suggest, if I had to go back or if I had to suggest something to someone, I would say first try to see if you can find something that you really want to do in terms of a career or an end
Hmm.
goal, and then
Hmm.
try to work back
Hmm.
and see if
Hmm.
an MBA fits. If it's taking too long, if it's still hard to find what the end goal looks like, I think it's a good option to do an MBA, because a part of the MBA is also to discover what's out there and trying to kind of rediscover your own self also.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. So, you made a very interesting choice of
Going
going to so you made a very interesting choice of going to Canada rather than US, where when you think of MBA, most of the people instantly think of a US MBA. So walk me through, like, what was going on in your head when you were thinking between Canada and US, and eventually, like, why did you decide for a Canadian MBA compared to US MBA?
Yeah, absolutely. So a part of my story that I was going to share earlier was that right after I did not get the kind of options I wanted in India for MBA schools, I went to UK to work with my client, and I was there for about a year and a half. And that was the first time I
Mm-hmm.
actually lived out of the country, which
Mm-hmm.
probably changed a bit of my opinions about living out or the kind of life that people have outside of India. And
Mm-hmm.
it also kind of helped me be a bit more financially secure. So for a lot of people, uh, when a little bit of money comes to your life, it kind of changes a bit of your perspective uh, with the
Mm-hmm.
things that you can do. So at that point,
Mm-hmm.
I had some money in my hand, and I had traveled a little more. So it helped me change my perspective of what is available. So the moment you start traveling, obviously
Mm-hmm.
you get a bit more of a global perspective, and you start thinking a bit more globally. So I
Mm-hmm.
started thinking about or toying with this idea of doing an MBA outside of India, because I also started talking to people who were doing their MBAs in India, and the
Mm-hmm.
experience, that was my personal thought, the experience that they were having was very academic. And I
Mm-hmm.
personally at that point thought that that wasn't the kind of experience I was looking for my master's in business. I really wanted to
Mm-hmm.
focus a lot more on my soft skills, and I did get an idea that that's something that I genuinely want to focus on, because hard skills I thought I could acquire on my own if I had to. And Indian
Mm-hmm.
MBAs, I felt from a lot of interaction with people, were probably not focusing on that. And the second reason was that I was looking for a global cohort, which was really hard to find in
Mm-hmm.
an Indian MBA anyway. So I started toying with this idea, and part of me wanted to go to Europe. I would say a part of me because wanted to have fun, and Europe is an amazing place to travel. A part of me wanted to go to Spain
Hmm.
initially, but due to economic
Hmm.
reasons, I think in terms of the economy of Europe at that point, it was really hard for me to pursue that. And also, Europe has language barriers, so I wasn't really sure if it would be an easy option. And also, I spoke to a lot of people at that point. A lot of people did not have jobs post their masters or post their MBA. So I became a little reluctant about Europe. And like you said
Hmm.
earlier, I started thinking of the US. I have a lot of people that
Hmm.
I know in the US, and it was an easy option to start looking at. And I initially started looking at US, and in fact, applied to 5 schools in the US. But somewhere in the middle, when I was, let's say around November, December, that's where the first round deadlines have already gone by, and you're looking for some results, or
Hmm.
you're probably trying to think that you want to apply to another school in the second round. And one of my friends had already gotten
Hmm.
into York University in Canada. And that is the first time I've actually heard of a university
Hmm.
in Canada which offered an MBA school. So I started to explore a little bit for some reason, and I started to see a lot of these Canadian universities and MBA fairs in India. And I tried to compare what it would be to
Hmm.
do an MBA in Canada versus the US because I mean, everybody knows that there's always going to be a visa issue in the US. This is something that everybody knows when they start applying for MBA schools in the US. And MBA schools in general are a little more
Hmm.
expensive in the US as compared to Canada. And I'm that kind of a person that I did not
Hmm.
want to have that stress of spending a lot of money, more than 150,000 dollars, and not knowing whether I would be able to stay in the country. I mean, I just did not want to deal with that stress.
Yeah. So more of like stability was what kind of pivoted you from US to a Canadian MBA. So I want to go back just like to a couple of points earlier that you made. You said you'd worked in the UK before you started your MBA. Did that experience of a couple of years of working, in a global setting help you as you started your MBA? Do you think that was something that kind of came in really handy and valuable when you started your MBA?
Oh yeah, absolutely, no doubt about it. I mean, for a lot of people who come from India, and let's say if that is the first time they've actually lived outside of India, um, you could travel outside India, but that's not the same as living outside India. Uh, it just gives you another level of confidence and level of comfort while dealing with the people from different geographies and different nationalities. Uh,
Yeah.
UK is a hugely diverse country, and you meet people from all over the world, really. So it did give me a good understanding of how to work with people from different parts of the world. And eventually, when you
Yeah.
start doing your MBA, those are your colleagues in the MBA program, and your colleagues in the MBA program will eventually go a long way, becoming your great friends, and eventually will be your network in any geography around the world. So
Yeah.
that gave me the
Yeah.
confidence of working with them or befriending them easily and initially, and understanding cultures is also an important part of it, which kind of helps you gel with people from all around the world. So that experience in UK definitely did help me.
Yeah. No, I think moving to a completely new country and a completely new culture is a big change in anyone's life. And I think if you do have some global experience before you move out of your country to another country, it kind of helps you just transition in a little more smoother manner than it would be otherwise. So let's step a little forward. So now you've thought about US and Canada, and you're applying to business schools, and you said you were talking to a lot of your contacts that you already had at these business schools. What were the things that you were trying to understand about these schools, or what would you say is really critical now looking back to understand about these schools as you evaluate which schools would be good schools to apply to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first step for anyone applying for an MBA program is always the introspection in terms of what you would really want. And it's not
Mhm.
easy to complete that introspection without having information from other people's experience. So the kind of questions.
So let's break it down a little bit. When we say introspection in terms of what we want, let's make it a little more specific. Are we talking what do you want in terms of professional growth? What do you want in terms of personal changes, or how would you look at it in terms of setting those goals that you would want to achieve out through your 2 years in the MBA? So how would you look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for example, if not most, let's say, but a lot of Indian candidates, I've had these requests on LinkedIn where they message me and say that, hey, I've gotten into so and so school. What do you think about the school? And my question is, dude, you've already gotten into it. Did you not do your research? Are you still confused? So the thing is that a lot of people apply and they just want to get in because they don't have that view of why they applied, why they wanted to go in. And like you said, it's important to separate your profession, the kind of professional growth you want, the kind of personal growth you want, and also in a sense the kind of experience you want to have in those 2 years. Because a lot of people, I feel, discard the fact that that experience will eventually change the kind of person you want to be, change the kind of leader you want to be eventually, because we're talking here of the MBA program.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not just the kind of job you want, but it's, like I said, also the kind of experience you want. So, in terms of introspection, I would recommend people to first kind of look inwards and see a kind of um, split these into three parts where you say, okay, this is what my experience has been. These are the 2 years where I can learn these kind of soft skills, focus on these kind of things, learn these kind of hard skills. And then this is where I want to
Mm-hmm.
get onto, which could be an industry, which could be a function, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And then when you have these chats
Yeah.
with people who are doing their MBAs in certain schools, you kind of ask those questions
Yeah.
where you say that, hey, this is the kind of person I am, and I wanted to build those soft skills. How does
Yeah.
a specific MBA program help me build these soft skills, or help me build these hard skills? And
Yeah.
then you start talking of the industry and function. And again, this is a
Yeah.
larger question in terms of what inspection exercise they might want to have. But and then you
Yeah.
start seeing that, let's say, if such and such MBA school in such and such geography, do they have this kind of industry? Do they
Mm-hmm.
have this kind of geography? So on and so forth. And again, we see this word being thrown around a lot, the fit. You try to assess
Mm-hmm.
the kind of personality you are, the kind of experiences you want, and you try to get a vibe of the school by asking a lot of questions, by basically putting yourself in the shoes of the other person and then asking them questions in terms of how do you feel, what do you think you made the right decision, what does your daily thing look like,
Yeah.
are you happy, are you frustrated, and then looking at a lot of stats. And you have to do this visual exercise of trying to put yourself in the shoes of that person and see that would you be happy in that kind of an environment. Um,
Yeah. So one of the things I have heard from a lot of applicants when they start reaching out and doing this exercise of reaching out to current students and alumni of various business schools is they come back and they say, "Oh, everything is great. The school's like great. Everybody says the school is great." And the tricky part there is, I mean, the way these questions are structured, a lot of times it's very open ended and it leaves a lot of wiggle room for people to not be specific. And, in the end, the applicant ends up not getting the exact kind of insights that would enable that person to evaluate whether the school is a good fit for that person or not. So, you've been on both sides of the line where you were reaching out to these people and now you had people reaching out to you. What are a couple of things that you think can help get those real candid insights rather than getting those generic everything is great kind of answers from current students and alumni?
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there will be a lot of students or alumni of a certain school who may or may not give you the best picture of what goes on in the MBA school, because a lot of people would like to always talk positive things about their alma mater or their experience, so on and so forth. But I think the more in-depth questions you ask, the more specific you get about the kind of questions you ask. I think that kind of pushes people to go back into their experience and kind of open up in terms of what exactly happened. And the second thing is, I think the more number of people you talk to, someone will eventually get candid, at least in some sort of questions. And if they're happy, they
Yeah.
will definitely convince you that this is exactly their experience. And if they're not happy, they will definitely share that this is exactly their experience. In terms of the
Yeah.
questions, again, there's a breadth of questions that you could ask, and but it's all about getting specific. And even though, let's say, there's a question that you asked, and if you're not happy with that question, you should definitely go ahead and poke that answer and be like, hey, what do you mean by this? Hey, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that you're happy, or what do you mean that you had a good experience? Um, so be very specific, and that specificity will definitely help you get to the right answer, I think.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good point. I think it helps kind of, being a little more specific in your questions and giving them a context of, what kind of a person you are, so that the person you're talking to also has some insights into what kind of things you're looking for and can give you the real guidance on whether you can get it from that program
Yeah,
or
yeah.
not.
That's a good point.
And
Absolutely, because a lot of students don't end up sharing exactly what they want. Because, like you said, when students are on the other side, they also sometimes shy away from sharing exactly what they want, because sometimes I feel they feel that this is not the forum of sharing exactly what they want, or maybe they don't want to be as honest as possible, considering sometimes a lot of students are involved in the admissions process and they help the admissions
Mhm.
committee with some decisions. So again, it always helps to be completely honest what you're looking at and what you're looking for. And
Mhm.
definitely, if only if you are honest, you can expect a candid response from the other side.
And so now you've kind of done the research, you've figured out, okay, these are a couple of schools that would be, good schools for you to apply to. Next component of the whole process is essays, and oh boy, do they
Yeah.
take time, right? Um, how did you approach your essays? Like, did you just start writing right away, or did you like break them down into, some sort of storylines that you had handy beforehand, and then you kind of figure out which story would go well with which essay, and you just brought it in? Was there some structured approach you took, or was it more like, okay, here's the question, let's just jump into it?
I mean, yeah, very basic. Initially, very basic approach that I took was to kind of break down my strengths and weaknesses and my stories into what kind of trait of my personality does each story show. So, is it a story which shows kind of my leadership, or is it a story which shows my teamwork ability, so on and so forth? So, I tried to write down my achievements from my past, and be it in my during my undergrad or my work experience, and then I also try to classify those achievements in terms of professional achievements or some achievements which were a bit more extracurricular. That kind of helps you again learn a bit more about yourself, because a lot of these stories which we might think are our best stories may not be the best stories, and a lot of the stories which we think are not so good may be the best one. But the idea is to kind of write down all the stories that you felt were good times in your life, or where you achieved something, or you were in a
Mm-hmm.
situation where you're probably down and out, and maybe you came back up, so on and so forth. A lot of these questions keep
Yeah,
changing, I think, these days. So best is to have a repository of those stories, those strengths, those weaknesses. And I think one standard question
yeah,
which all B schools ask in some sort of the other is, why MBA? Why this MBA? And
yeah.
maybe something about geography. And there's obviously, so there's some part about why MBA and some part about why you. So the stories did help
Mm-hmm.
me, and And obviously, the research for the MBA school helped me answer the other questions.
Yeah, no, I think those, if you can go back and have a collection of situational experiences, both related to achievement, success, failure, and things like that. I think they also come in handy when you start recruiting in the business school, because a lot of interviews go into your behaviors in these situational experiences, and if you already have done that homework when you were applying to business school, when you start recruiting a couple of months into the business school, it just gives you a good platform to jump off of, rather than having to start from scratch
Yeah,
again.
absolutely.
So let me ask you this: which was the most difficult essay for you to write? Like, I don't know if you remember; it's been a while, but if you can think of, okay, this was the essay that literally took steam out of you to write. Which I know for myself. For me, it was like Berkeley used to have an essay then, which was, if there's a song that describes you, what would it be and why? It was a fun essay, but I think I took like 3.5 weeks to write that 250 words essay, and I ate like lots of desserts while I was writing that. So, so which one was the most
Uh,
difficult for you?
no, it's amazing you remember your the essay that you thought was the hardest for you. But I think I don't remember a specific essay, but I'm trying to think. Um, I think I don't remember what essay was that specifically was the hardest to write. But again, these essays which are a little more offbeat, really, obviously, and which force you to think out of the box. I mean, there's essays which talks about your leadership and skills and all of those things, which are a little straightforward.
Yeah,
But the other
yeah,
essays are genuinely a little different. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I mean, all the essays, frankly, take time. Even though a simple YMBA
yeah.
essay, you might think that is an easy question to answer, but because everybody's probably like writing the same things here and there, I think those kind of essays also eventually become tough to answer, because again, you're looking for something unique. And let's say you're talking to a few people at an MBA school, and this comes from this mindset that you have to answer something completely different, and you have to show a
Mm-hmm.
completely unique side of yourself or something that you found, which I feel ideally it
Mm-hmm.
should be the other way around, where you show your real self rather than showing something unique. But this is
Yeah.
the MBA admissions is highly competitive, so you can't really blame the students for that. But again,
Mm-hmm.
most essays I feel are tough to handle, because again, there's sometimes the word limit which kills you, because there's so much to say. You have to kind of pick
Yeah.
which strength to show, which success story to focus on. So it's sometimes really hard to decide which is the best one to go with.
Yeah.
And um, and then a
Yeah.
lot of people don't know what is the strategy around which one to choose, so it takes a lot of time in terms of figuring that out, and maybe it takes a lot of time in terms of asking others which story to go with. So you do need a lot of some people do need a lot of support, or a network of people who they can bounce off those ideas with, which definitely helps in terms of making those choices.
Yeah, I think you made a very important point there, which was about uniqueness. I see a lot of applicants trying to force uniqueness in these essays, whereas the ideal way, in my experience, has been that you show who you are, and that brings out the uniqueness by itself. Because what are the odds that somebody else will be exactly like you, right? Okay, yeah, I mean, he might be in the same job as you are, but the more personalized your essays are, the more personal elements of your motivators, interest areas, and your background you bring into the essays, that gives it a very unique flavor, rather than trying to force fit that uniqueness into your essays. So let's step a little more forward. You apply, you write all these difficult essays, and now you've gotten the admit, and suddenly you realize, oh shit, now I have to arrange $100,000 to pay for the tuition, right? That's a big amount. So, um, how do you think people should look at that? Like, a lot of people think of it like, okay, it's an investment in their future, and you're gonna pay it off in 4 to 5 years. It's gonna get them to a different trajectory, so worth it. And a lot of people think of it in terms of, it's too expensive, I don't want to go abroad because it's unaffordable. and I am going to go to ISB or some other schools. ISB is still expensive compared to a lot of other options, but there are other options in India which are not as expensive as you might pay for a MBA abroad. And given the uncertainty in terms of the whole immigration and all that's going on right now, what factors would you take into account if you were making that decision and thinking of the finances, and you were like, okay, now I need to figure out if it is worth taking on that risk of 150 or $160,000 in today's day and time to go do a foreign MBA, or just stay within India and do something from an Indian business school.
Yeah, that's a long question. So everybody is in a people are in different situations within their with their finances, and so one of the things is that, let's say, after an undergrad, when someone starts working in India, their the kind of salaries in India are not as high as the kind of salaries in the US or in Europe. So it's very hard for an
Mm-hmm.
average Indian candidate or aspirant to save money on their own if they've only worked in India. The
Mm-hmm.
other option for them is, if they, let's say, in my
Mm-hmm.
case also, if they work 1 or 2, 3 years abroad and they've maybe saved up some money, then they probably have some capital to play with when they're thinking of
Mm-hmm.
applying for an MBA abroad. And the third or fourth option in this case would be, in India, in a lot of these
Mm-hmm.
cases, their parents, a lot of the students or aspirants' parents tend to help them out. So, and again, there could be an extreme case where it's for someone it's
Mm-hmm.
not easy to afford that kind of a thing, and they have to. The only way is to take a loan or take a mortgage. So everyone's financial situation is different, and everyone's risk-taking ability with the kind of money they want to spend is extremely difficult, and it's a highly, highly, highly personalized choice. When someone says that, hey, you have this $100,000, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to spend it on an MBA? Or, with the same $100,000, you could actually start something fabulous in India as well.
Yeah.
So it's very, very hard to say what people should do, but I think people
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
genuinely gauge
So.
their options in terms of what do they want. For example, someone who's looking to do an MBA, they could be single, they could be married, they could have kids, could not have kids. So what I'm trying to say, and their parents' financial situations, their financial situation around them, so on and so forth. I would say that it's important to evaluate things around you in terms of your finances, because an MBA, initially you might think that it might cost you X amount of money with your tuition fee, but the living expenses only compile and only bite you in the back. And like you said, it's the immigration
Mm-hmm.
situation is not that straightforward. Sometimes it's not that easy for people to
Mm-hmm.
perform in an MBA program, and sometimes not that easy to get a job. And even if you do get a job, it's not that easy to kind of come back to where you were right away if you have a lot of responsibilities. So the less responsibilities you have, the easier it is to take that decision.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and there was one of these questions was, then you could stay in India, do an MBA. I'll give you one example. When I was thinking of doing an MBA
Mm-hmm.
abroad, and I met a lot of people who said that, why don't you do an MBA in India? ISB is a great school, which is a great point. But my simple calculation was that if I wanted to stay in India only, it made total sense to do an MBA at ISB. But if I would do a global MBA, I could still come back to India. And the second reason was, I think ISB's tuition fees at that point was around 25, 30 lakh for a year. And then, let's say, a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of charges to kind of stay for that 1 year at their campus. And McGill's tuition fee was around $80,000, which is around 40 lakh, plus, let's say, living expenses, which would be around 10 to 15 lakh, 50,
Mm-hmm.
55. And I thought that I'm paying one and a half, 2 times more, let's say, in this case. But my returns will be, even if I get an average job right after the MBA, my returns would be much higher than an
Yeah.
ISB MBA. And my experience, and if you just compare, very simply compare, my experience will be entirely different. I will be at another geography. I will travel
Yeah.
differently. I would have met people from 30, 40 different countries. My complete mindset would have changed by then. Whereas I know the kind of people who go into ISB, and they would be the same people I've had met before my 25, 30 years of my life before that. So I would not even have had a different experience, and I would have still been in a similar spotty financial situation. So that's how I was evaluating that kind of a situation.
Yeah. So you ended up in Montreal. How was Montreal as a city to live? Like for people who are thinking of McGill as an option, what would you say was Montreal like? Did you have fun?
Oh yeah, fun would be an understatement. Montreal is an amazing city, according to me. I think I've heard this from a lot of people. I think I'm a Montreal fanboy because I didn't get to live in Montreal after my MBA. I didn't get to enjoy Montreal when I had money in my pocket,
Mm-hmm.
because the 2 years when I was in Montreal, I was basically just spending money. I wasn't earning anything. It's a fabulous city. It's a
Mm-hmm.
smaller city as compared to Toronto, but a lovely city in terms of the vibe that it gives you, the kind of things you can do there, and the kind of people you meet. I had a great experience, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the reasons I wanted to be in an MBA school, which was right in the middle of a downtown area in a city. So this kind of, and I think it kind of
Mm-hmm.
stemmed from the fact that I did my undergrad in not a big city, and I wanted to make sure my postgrad experience
Mm-hmm.
was in a bigger city and a nicer city where I could do more things and have a different experience. So as a city, Montreal was a 10 on 10 for me.
Yeah. And what were the kind of things you did while you were in Montreal? Just for people who are thinking of it as an option, if you could give them a little bit of a insight into what are the things they could do outside the school in Montreal.
Yeah, definitely. So Montreal is a nice laid back city. There's a huge influence of French culture in the city. There's a lot of people who speak French there. I think around 66% people speak French in Montreal. So in North America, it gives you an entirely different experience. It kind of gives you a European vibe at the same time. In terms of what you could do outside of an MBA program, so Montreal has a huge. I mean, they have a lot of bars. So in terms of your social life, there's a lot of bars you could go to, and every bar kind of gives you a different experience. There's a lot of activities you can do and join a lot of different clubs, whether you like to be outside in the summer, whether you like biking, whether you like playing some sports, or you simply like to go out and travel. There's a lot of things to do around Montreal. There's a lot of events which happen specifically in the
Mm-hmm.
summer. For example, things like there's a
Mm-hmm.
jazz festival that happens just for laugh. It happens there. The Grand Prix happens in Montreal, for example, in June.
Yeah.
Um, so in terms of events, it's probably the
Yeah.
go-to place specifically for the summer. And although it gets a little cold in the winters, but again, there's a lot of events that happen
Yeah.
in the winter as well. For example, there's something called the Igloo Festival, which happens in February, where people go out and party in the snow. So it keeps you busy. And sometimes when you're doing an MBA, it's not just, let's say, outside the school, within the university also there's a network that you can create. There's a lot of clubs that keep you busy if you choose to be a part of those clubs, and an MBA in general keeps you hugely busy. So there's always opportunities
Mm-hmm.
to stay with your MBA people, or mingle with the universities folks, or go out and talk to people and network and enjoy the life in Montreal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how was McGill in terms of your experience? Like, okay, if you were to, you know, pick the highlights of your McGill experience, what did you really feel stood out for you in terms of the MBA school itself?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I think if I just think of the highlights, the one of the major reasons I chose McGill as the program, and the thing is, I only applied to McGill when I thought of Canada. I only wanted to apply to one school, which I thought was the best fit school, and I applied to McGill, and luckily I got in. But one of the main reasons was the small class size. I always wanted to get into a
Mm-hmm.
small class size, and my analysis of a small class size versus a bigger class size is this: that in a smaller class size, you get to know people and you get to know everyone so well that you actually
Mm-hmm.
become their really good friends. So let's say we had around 75 people in our class, and I know all of those 75 people's
Mm-hmm.
first name, last name, where they were
Oh
probably,
wow.
their country of origin, their city of origin. and I know them on a first name basis, and I don't know them really well. And the thing was that we had one lounge area at the McGill MBA program, and all of us would sometimes hang out in that lounge area. So that lounge area kind of forced us to meet each other's, even if you didn't like someone or you liked someone, you just had to see each other's faces every day, which kind of increased our interactions, and it cemented us each other in each other's lives really well. So in terms of the depth of network or depth of friendships,
Yeah.
I think a small class size really helps you. And the fact that when it's a small class size, you have a
Hmm.
much better access to your professors, and your professors actually become really good friends. We had instances where we were going out having drinks with professors on a on a frequent basis. We would have lunches with them, dinners with them, and really get to know them. And that kind of helps you bond with not only people in your class, but also bond with people around your university, your professors, so on and so forth. So that was one genuine reason, which I think was one of the best experience, one of the things that enhanced my experience. And a few other things, because it was a smaller class size, kind of stems from that. I got to do so many things. I was part of three clubs, two of them kind of in a leadership capacity, one of them in a co-leadership capacity. If you're in a bigger school, it's not that easy to lead clubs and enhance your leadership skills. And I'm sure there's a lot of competition also to kind of be the leader of those clubs. So this gave me an opportunity to also lead clubs which were not just MBA specific, but also university specific. So one of these things that I did was I was the campus director of something called Hult Prize at McGill, which was more related to social entrepreneurship. And it's not that I was highly passionate about social entrepreneurship, but that's something that I
Yeah.
really wanted to explore. So I got that opportunity, and the great thing about that was that it gave me an opportunity to go outside of the MBA program and work with future doctors or medical students, work with people from social work, work from the psychology, school of psychology, a lot of
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. So I was helping a lot of student entrepreneurs, mentoring them at the same time, trying to figure out how I can help them with their pitches, so on and so forth. So it's not that easy at a lot of schools to get that kind of an experience. So that was again another great experience I had at that school.
Yeah.
And Montreal does have that nice close knit. Sorry, McGill does have that nice close knit community where everyone is helping each other. And within the
Yeah.
school, and again, it comes in from the smaller class size. It becomes a nice family where people are trying to help each other more often than not, as compared to having cutthroat competition. And I think one of the things that helps you is to kind of build your leadership skills in a way that you start empathizing with people a lot more, as compared to,
Hmm.
I think, if you were in a larger school, it's not that easy to empathize with each other because you just cutthroat at every moment. You're just competing with everyone else.
Hmm.
So I thought that it helped me kind of become the leader I want to be and have the right conversation with the right kind of people. So it's the people who helped me a lot, and it's the kind of place that I was, which kind of facilitated that
Yeah.
experience that I had.
And you did mention, making good relationships with your professors, and having those moments of where you could have good interactions with them over dinner or going out for drinks. What were some of your favorite courses and professors at McGill?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So one of my favorite professors, and I think she's probably the favorite professor for most of us, was this female called Sujata Madan. She was the one who taught us modern corporate finance, and she's also a part of the first 4 months, which at McGill we call the core. In fact, um,
Hmm.
so she was one of the best professors we had because she's very outgoing, very nice, and she's one of those people you meet, and you just generally open up to her because she's that kind of a personality. So I've been in touch with her. It's
Hmm.
always nice to meet her. Although I'm not working in a financial function really right now, but again, took her courses and really enjoyed working with her.
Yeah. And
Another professor. Sorry, go ahead.
no, sorry, I meant to ask you another question, but you were talking about another professor.
Yeah, so there were other professors. I mean, there's one professor, as I think his name is Michael Avedisian. I took his course called Technology Entrepreneurship. Amazing course, because a part of the course, what you had to do was you had to work with a startup company to help them
Mm-hmm.
with the challenges you're facing. And Michael also has a lot of experience being an entrepreneur. So,
Mm-hmm.
and not just me, and I wasn't really looking to become an entrepreneur, but I have my friends who one of my friends who was looking to open his own startup, and he had a fabulous experience, not only working with the professor but being able to tap into his network and kind of getting the kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentorship he got from him was something that you
Mm-hmm.
really can't see. I don't know if it's that easy to kind of find that in a school which has a lot of students. So those are a few examples which you'll definitely see at McGill, Desautels, where you'll find a lot of these professors who've helped
Yeah.
students so much just because they had the time and the bandwidth
Mm-hmm.
and the willingness to take part
Mm-hmm.
in our career.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to ask you this question as we get towards the end of this conversation. And I ask this question to most of the people I interview, or even when I was applying to business schools myself. If you look back at Akshay, who went into McGill, and you look at yourself today, how do you think, let's take top three bullet points, how do you think the whole MBA experience and the McGill experience changed you? Like, what are the three biggest changes that you think came in you because of that experience?
Yeah, I think the first big change that I see in myself today is the kind of structure of thought that I have when I not only
Mm-hmm.
speak to someone in a professional setting, but also in my personal life. Because I think what an MBA does teach you is a way to is a tool. In fact, it's not a tool really, but somehow through the whole process, you understand how to think and you understand how to absorb information and then how to react to that situation. So the first thing that I would say is my structure and flow of thought has become a bit more streamlined than it was, and today that is the least of my problems
Mm-hmm.
when I'm communicating with people. The second is, I think, the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And mindset would be a little broader in terms of my personal
Mm-hmm.
mindset and my mindset about what my professional career would look like. And a bit of it is also because of
Mm-hmm.
the Canadian culture, the Canadian environment, or maybe it's more Montreal and a bit of Toronto that right now I'm here. But but I have a different view of what my personal life
Mm-hmm.
should look like, and I have a completely different view of what my professional life or what my professional motivations are as compared to when I looked myself 3 years ago when I was just starting out
Mm-hmm.
and I had some vague views about what a professional life should be or what
Mm-hmm.
success means. So I would say a lot of my definitions of what success means, what failure is,
Mm-hmm.
what growth is, and so on and so forth have changed
Mm-hmm.
completely. So the mindset has definitely changed. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the third thing, if I can say, is the way I look at myself. So I think a little bit more sure of myself. So in terms of MBA is a huge reflection exercise where you get 2 years where you're not only building your hard skills and soft skills, but also every moment you're trying to think that, okay, what is it that I want in my life? What is it that I want in my career? And because an MBA pushes you so much, it puts you in frustrating positions, tough positions, lack of sleep, lack of coffee, lack of food, and whatnot. It forces you to reinvent yourself and kind of find your real core. So I think if I
Mm-hmm.
look at myself 3 years back, I think I'm a bit more sure of myself,
Mm-hmm.
and genuinely, definitely, the MBA does help you with that. And I think a part of it, I also believe, is because of the kind of people you meet, and
Mm-hmm.
every school has a flavor in terms of how they hire people as a cohort. And I think Desautels McGill has a unique way of, I think, hiring the kind of people they hire, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's also the kind of vibes they get from people, because there's a hashtag that Desautels McGill uses. It's called Desautels Family, hashtag Desautels Family. So they want people within the school which can gel with each other, which can support each other. And I think that support, that feeling of family, that feeling of community was probably the first time I ever got in my life with such strength, which eventually helped me with all these 3 points that I mentioned and helped me be the person I am today.
Yeah, yeah. No, these are really helpful perspectives, Akshay, and thanks again for taking time out and talking to us. I hope all the people who are applying to business schools in general, and also people who are looking for some information specifically on McGill, they'll definitely find this helpful.
Thank you.
And we will be back with another episode really soon. So stay tuned to our podcast and have a good weekend.